Hello, everybody, and welcome to Amagra's music channels. And today we are welcoming Daniel Dettwiler, which is a sound engineer and professor at the Zurich University of Art, and he has worked with the London Symphony Orchestra and the WDR with a big band, which I love. And he's also premiering his mixing Bible, in which he explains all the details of a music production, as you can as well see in his YouTube channel, where he offers advice for free. And you are all welcome to subscribe and visit. I will leave you the links on the description. So welcome, Daniel. Thank you so much for accepting. I'm very honored. And you can tell us a little bit more about what you're doing, because I've been watching on your social medias that you've been recording with quite a lot of people lately. And so let us know what you think.
Yeah, so thanks you for having me. My name is Daniel Dettwiler, and I'm mainly a mixing engineer and a mastering engineer. I also do some recordings every now and then. I don't actually like it so much to do recordings nowadays. I prefer to mix, but sometimes if really outstanding quality is needed, or if the client is really asking for this quality, then I'll go to put on the microphones. I have the luxury to really have great microphones. I won't tell a lot about this because I think it will more be about mixing today. But when I was young, I had the luck to record at really nice studios, and I didn't know so much about nice mics, about vintage microphones, but I just brought my mics that I had. But then, I just heard the difference. And once I heard the difference, I wanted to have the vintage microphones myself. So I think the last 30 years, I really spent a lot of the money that I can spend. I mean, of course, as an engineer, you anyway cannot spend that much money because, as we all know, we are all in the same boat. We are not going to earn as much as a lawyer or as somebody who is working at the financial institution. But still, I mean, you have to invest. That's, I think, an important message also in my course. Without any investment, if you are a farmer and you want to have a lot of whatever you want to have, you first need to bring it out and then you can get it back. So because I have all those microphones at my disposal, it would be a waste of microphones not to record with them. So sometimes I do recordings, but then I really only do the sound. And then the tracking somebody else is doing, also the producing. I'm not a producer. I think it's important to specialize. There are many engineer producers. That's totally fine too. If somebody can do both, then maybe he's not doing mastering or not doing other things. I do whatever has to do something with sound. That can be placing a microphone in a really awesome place. Yes. It can be mixing, it can be mastering, but then I don't do the production thing because you cannot do everything. But my main interest is mixing, and I think a year ago, it's probably a year, I built the studio you see here. I can quickly give you an insight. This is the actually a really great console. It's the KDEC board on which Bohemian Rhapsody was produced. And if you don't know KDEC is really between 1970 and 1979. They have been producing, and most engineers of that time are really saying this too, just the best sounding desks that you could have. Way better than everything else. Because you can have a smooth sound like on a Neve, but you can also have transient, you can have a punchy sound. It's just with the KDEC, everything goes. And I was really lucky to find this board because there are not many KDEC boards available. They didn't produce a lot because they were more expensive than the old Neves back then. And some of the big studios bought KDEC, but then they sold KDECs to every studio. And then KDEC never wanted to make cheaper desks like SSL and Neve would also have offered. I mean, they didn't offer cheap desks, but they offered the very expensive, the payable desks. And KDEC didn't want to do this. So they are rare. And then we had built this room for the KDEC desk with a lot of outboard and with the critical listening station. I think you can see it at the other side of the room, which I think was one of the better ideas I ever came up with, because otherwise either you have a great analog desk to mix, and then whatever speaker you have behind the desk is always always giving reflections. There's just no way how you can avoid this. So no matter how great your speakers are, you cannot really judge reverbs anymore, and you could not master. And that's why we have our mastering speakers on the other side of the room with a perfect acoustics there, and the analog corner is basically here.
Very nice. And I see it's the quality of the console is more suitable because you record more jazz and you need the full extension of the sound the microphones can reproduce, I believe.
Yeah, but if I do mixing stuff, I do basically mix a lot of genres. I also get pop every now and then, not that much, because in our country, Switzerland, is usually the pop artists don't want to spend a lot of money to mix. So you usually have to do a mix in a half day, and I don't want to do this. But every now and then, pop band wants a great sound, and then they come to me too. Jazz is what we do very often, and also scoring work. And I think the KDEC is really great on all types of music. It's nothing that wouldn't work on that board. And that's different to other boards, because if you have a nice sounding Neve, if you need a smooth sound, then with the Neve, it's absolutely great too, no question. But if you want to get impulses through, well, that doesn't really work with the Neve, because at every stage you have trebles. A treble on the EQ in, EQ out, again, treble, again, a treble. And if you want this, super cool. But if you don't want this, no way. With the KDEC, the truffles are actually on the patch bay. So where we want the truffle, we can have one. But otherwise, basically, the signal flow is more like on EMI desks, the desk that Abbey Road were doing.
Right.
Make it at the microphone input, but then let's make it without trebles, because otherwise you have maybe too much smoothing. It's way more complicated to build a console like EMI or KDEC without trebles, because if you have trebles at every stage, it's very easy. You don't have any hum problems because it's separated at every stage. It's easy. It's more difficult to avoid trebles and still have a great sounding console. But this is what the KDEC is really doing. And I think what I specialized in is a really cool combination about working in the box in Pro Tools and working on the KDEC. At the end, analog mixers such as me, or also others that still mix analog, I mean, we always have to say it's always a hybrid approach. I mean, I think there is probably no mixer that really purely works analog. With an analog tape recorder, all the edits analog, everything analog. I mean, that doesn't really happen today anymore. And I'm also happy that this is not happening, because I would not want to have my tracks on tape and then you have to mix it. You always have to rewind the tape. I mean, that's
a hassle for sure. I believe the old school did the best they could to have the best quality of sound, but they quickly embraced the digital era because it was more exciting. It offered more possibilities and higher quality of audio.
And today, I mean, with Pro Tools, you can have amazing converters. We have those Avid MTRX converters. We upgraded to those when I built that room, because I wasn't just not happy anymore with the Avid converters. They are really not that great. And if you really have high-end jazz recordings, you don't want that degradation that the Avid DAs and ADs were doing to the signal, which is really not small. And with the MTRX, I mean, that degradation is just gone. With that interface, you really can go out and in, and whatever damage the DA/ADs are still doing, the damage is so small compared to the advantage from the analog system that there's really no question. There is no problem going out and going back in again.
It's great to find someone who appreciates the cleanliness of this kind of equipment, as opposed to the love for saturation and Neve consoles and rock and roll that we all have over here at YouTube and channels. So, Daniel, tell me more about the mixing Bible you are just have on sale.
Yeah, actually, it all started in the COVID time, where I just thought maybe I go one step back. But I'm really lucky to be an engineer with extremely great projects. And at the same time, I had the chance to teach, I think, since 25 years, because I was asked by a school. It started with just some hours, and I started teaching. And I just evolved this teaching thing too. And I started to understand what upcoming engineers or musicians that want to mix. Today, musicians also need to be able to mix, basically, because they not always can charge for a sound engineer. And so I came up with very cool ideas how you could explain sound engineering. Because when I was young and I was listening what the professionals, the Grammy-winning engineers were saying and what they were doing, I always thought, well, okay, I see Chris Lord-Alge mixing. And after that, it sounded good. Yeah, I mean, you can like his sound or not. There is always taste, but there is no question that he is doing very great mixing work. And it's always working good. Born on the USA was like a song that I then realized it's from him. That's so powerful, so good. And you see him work, you think, oh, that's great. And he explains what he is doing, but actually he doesn't really explain it. It's like a chef and you watch him cooking, a 3-star chef. That's extremely an inspiration. And after 20 years, you see the great plate. But whatever he said, you cannot, because if you repeat it, it doesn't work. It might work for them, but it doesn't work. It's like if Roger Federer is saying how he does his tweener or his special things. Well, you can probably train this for years and it won't work.
Yeah, many times just they add the effect, and the way I see it is many times they add the effect and they rely on a preset, and they explain, oh, I'm using this box but just beyond that, they don't go too much into the settings.
Well, I think it's also they are great on an unconscious level. And sometimes as a human being, you are capable of doing some things, but you are not always capable of explaining them. And if you have to teach at your university, then you basically have to find a way to explain the magic or to explain what is basically unexplainable, but you have to explain it. Otherwise, you don't have to. It's like if you want to teach music. I mean, what it's really about, you cannot really teach. You can teach about technologies, but then still you can speak with, I don't know the English word, metaphor in German. Maybe you can translate it with, you can still explain the magic. Although it's basically unexplainable. And I think you see it already in my free YouTube courses when I speak about dynamics. I think I have a very cool way to explain why do we need to work on dynamics. Because finally, you can sum it in one word. We give control over the volume to our listeners, and our listeners are listening to music far more soft than what we would like as mixers. And now it should sound super big and super large at the low level. So if you only mix at the high level, high monitor level, it always sounds large. That's not a problem. The more you go to the original dynamic of the music, the larger it sounds. But the goal is to make it really sound great at the low level. And for this, you need to be able to control the dynamic. At the same time, you need to be able to control the dimension. And in the YouTube videos, I have to be kind of fast. And obviously, I can also not prepare for hours then for every YouTube video. This has to be, I offer it for free, and I have to be able to do it in a,
Yes, as a matter of fact, that's how I discovered your channel. I appreciate so much your free videos. Your videos on Reverb are exquisite, and they provide information that I've never seen before in other.
Yeah, that is important. That is also what I hope that those who found these videos and who see the channel will also provide a little bit, because that's actually really something that seems to be true, because many write me that they are on pure mix or mix with the master, but even engineers that are good with reverb, and of course we have other engineers that are great with reverbs too, but if they explain it, they kind of fail to explain it. And I think this is what I'm good at. I can explain it at another level. And now in the masterclass, it's again on another level, because of course the masterclass I prepared. I really did a lot of work. How do I bring the information? And there is way more conceptual information, because I think if you want to come up as a great mixer, either you are a musician now or an engineer, it doesn't matter. You need to understand the paradigms. You need to understand some basic thoughts about it. And I'll speak a lot about that in this masterclass. I call it the Mixing Bible. And then we make the examples. And of course, also the examples, they go more into the details that on the free YouTube channels. I also show some really bad production and some really good production, which is also a difference. If you see the videos of Chris Lord-Alge, just to name him, because I really think he's a great pop mixer. Well, he most often chooses to mix some great tracks that nobody of those who watch his video will ever have as great tracks. Not even I get all the times great tracks. Even as a national top mixer in Switzerland, the reality is I also get some shitty tracks. And even Chris gets some shitty tracks.
That's the fact. You have received a lot of tracks from Cuba.
But that's not what he shows. And actually, he holds a seminar in Switzerland, and then actually some Swiss engineers brought up their tracks. And then it was kind of a strange situation because Chris was absolutely not able to get something great out of those shitty tracks because those tracks were so shitty, like he would never ever see something like this in LA where he normally mixes. And this is something I often had. That was a great scoring mixer from Abbey Road Studio, a friend of mine. I don't tell the name. And he's really good. He made Avatar and other big movies. But then he once had to work in Berlin. And the studio was also good, but not quite as good as Abbey Road. The console was also good, but not quite as smooth and nice sounding as the Neve console from the Abbey Road. I mean, Neve and orchestra, that sounds good. And so finally, he just was not able to work with that situation. And he was not able to get a great rough mix. And then the director of the film came in and said, I never, ever had such a shitty mix. And at the next day, this engineer came an hour earlier to try to make a better rough mix. And the engineer from this studio tried to help him, although he didn't want to get any help. But yeah, that is something you have to be able to deal with very bad tracks too. And I showed in the masterclass really some production that were recorded in a bad way. And I show how far can we go in a mix. I also show tracks that are recorded very good, because at the end, we should all try to get better recorded tracks again. That is absolutely important. But the reality still is that you often get tracks from a band say, I'm very sorry, but the drum we recorded in the rehearsal, the singer recorded himself in the bedroom, and the third one maybe had just the SM57 for the acoustic guitar. Did it also?
When you get recordings from the same from professional studios, and it's the case that I received, that they are brilliant recording drums. They know how to properly mic a drums, but they don't know how to record a bass, and that's something that shocks me sometimes. And that's something that you have to be prepared to deal with. So I have a couple of questions before we go into the questions that my subscribers submitted to you, and I just want to ask mine first. And believe me, I'm very intrigued by the size of your speakers in the critical listening area.
You mean those?
Yes.
Yeah, those nice speakers.
Why did you choose? Are those 12 inches?
No, 15-inch subwoofers, but not 18. And those are great speakers by a Swiss manufacturer. He's called Strauss Electroacoustics. And Eric Valentine, meanwhile, also uses his speakers. And normally, I mean, the story, let's just make that one short, that we have still enough time for all the questions. Sony Music, I mean, the big label Sony, they built a huge studio, I think 20 years ago in Tokyo, and they just wanted to have better speakers than what was on the market. And they wrote to all speaker designers in the world, hey, just if you want to, we invite you to construct something better. It's basically a contest, and whoever wins this contest, we guarantee that we buy 40 of that speakers, and we don't negotiate with the price. And
that's right.
Yes, Strauss Electroacoustic, a Swiss guy, he's then said, yeah, that's great, because he always had a perfect mastering monitor that need to be totally passive in mind, but he didn't build it because the market would be too small. Because if you really develop a speaker and you build it, you have to be able to sell maybe 50 in the first year, otherwise you are bankrupt. And so he just knew that he would win this contest anyway, and that so he knew he could sell 40 speakers. And then that was also the case. And really about all manufacturers provided some new prototypes, but the Strauss was the best thing. And it's actually cool because it is a totally different direction than what other monitor manufacturers think is the next step. Actually, what they thought the next step would be was active electronics, active crossovers, active amplification. Now we even have DSPs. However, A DSP. Well, if you have a DSP in your loudspeaker, yeah, then you can measure your loudspeaker, and the loudspeaker might be perfect. Why not? The DSP is just fixing everything. But what you know, if you fix something with a DSP, let's say you have a problem and you fix it with a DSP, well, that is not coming for free. That creates other problems like a pre-ringing. And the pre-ringing or the pre-echo might be very subtle. You might not hear it active. No, I don't hear it. But I also don't like it because it kind of sounds strange or harsh. And so what Strauss is saying, the only way to get better in monitoring is passive. And then you need to have a perfect housing, perfect drivers. Everything needs to be perfect. And then he just worked very hard on this. He has a great near field that is actually payable. So I think the near field is about $8,000 or $7,000 for a stereo pair of great near fields. And that's not so much. And that was the first thing when Eric Valentine was visiting me. I mean, he loved the Strauss speakers, but he said he could not afford the big one. Well, I just laughed because, I mean, an engineer like Eric Valentine, I also told him this. If you get, I mean, we all know what they get. That's several thousand per song. You can easily buy an expensive set of speaker. And now he also bought the big one. He has a near field that is really payable. He has a great midfield, and he has these great big speakers. And as I say also to my clients, that sound is mattering for me. I want to be able to make perfect dimension. I need to be able to hear the room at all frequencies the same. If I have a speaker set, like let's not name names, but and then the dimension in the upper mids is larger than the dimension in the under mids, how should I make a great mix? It's finally not possible. You only can make the dimension great if you also hear the dimension in all the frequencies, even in 50 hertz. And this is with Strauss possible. And this is also, I invested in those speakers rather early, and I didn't have the money. I mean, a stereo pair is about 100,000 or something like this. But on the other hand, I felt, well, if I want to be an engineer, I need to have better speakers than others.
Absolutely.
You need to take the risk. And today, most engineers don't take risks anymore. And actually, you don't lose so much, because if you buy something and you see you overdid it, you spend too much money, or you cannot pay like the second half. Of course, I didn't pay everything in once. I said to this guy, hey, if you want to give me 2 of your speakers, I might pay half, and then maybe the other half in a year, take it or leave it. And as a young engineer, you can always make such deals with the developers, always, because I mean, they want that the young engineers are using their gear. So as long as you pay it somehow, they'll give it to you. And if you could not pay it, you still could sell it.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, you still could sell it.
No, absolutely. This is a thing that the quality of the listening environment and the listening devices you have is directly proportional to the quality of the results you get. And that's something so important, because things that worry us small studio owners is the tonal balance and not finding the resonance in the low mids. Those are topics that actually are a challenge in smaller spaces with smaller speakers, and that's what I was interested in your set of speakers, because I see it's great, it's big, and that's something I'm exploring now. I was going to ask you about because it's one of the strong topics in which you teach in YouTube is reverb, and especially pre-delay. And as a matter of fact, pre-delay is the question I have for you. And, when a sound is 20 milliseconds long, or 20 milliseconds or less, when a repetition is 20 milliseconds or less, it fuses with the sound, and which is when it's more than 20, it starts being perceived as a delay. And I wonder if you consider that when adding pre-delay in a reverb.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I see this kind of different. To me, it's like if you have a short pre-delay, then your reverb will melt with the dry source, and your dry source will go more to the back. Of course,
what do you consider short pre-delay?
No, to me, the pre-delay is just something I always set up to taste. And sometimes it's short and sometimes it's long. And what I want to say is that for me, if I want to bring the source to the back, I take short pre-delays or even no pre-delay, because then the reverb should start right away. And if I want that the source is totally dry, like a snare or a pop vocal, but still we want to hear the reverb, because finally the reverb is like a wall in a concert room. You might have the singer in the middle of the room, whatever, but still the concert room has walls. But if you're close to the singer, you hear the singer close, but the walls are still there. So actually you can simulate this with really large pre-delays, 60 milliseconds, sometimes 100 milliseconds. And whether you hear the delay or not depends on if you want to hear it or not, and what the arrangement and the mix is like. Because sometimes the mix is so dense that you anyway don't hear the pre-delay. But
that's right.
I never think, oh, the song has this tempo and I should have this pre-delay. To me, it's only a function. The longer the pre-delay, the closer my source. And the shorter the pre-delay, the further away is my source.
And do you think of it when it's longer pre-delay times that it might cause some delay? Do you think of it as we've been discussing, as a groove thing?
No. I don't see that this at all. Maybe I just by intuition set the pre-delays in a way that it's groovy. That could be, but probably not, because I never changed this for an entire CD. I usually have my outboard reverb because I love outboard. And usually my outboard reverb is just like reverbs that are there for the entire production. And I make sure that those sound good in the ballad and in the fast thing. And in the ballad, I just bring the level down.
No, that obviously means that you don't ever think of it, even if the difference in BPM between the songs is too much.
No, there's something other which is totally important. First of all, I mean, what is the pre-delay in a reverb really exactly doing? I wonder if everybody who tries to set up the pre-delay exactly is really knowing it, because in some reverbs, it's only moving the early reflections. In other plugins, it's only removing the late part of the reverb. In most plugins, and that's how I would like to have implemented it, it moves both together, because pre-delay for me means whatever this plugin is doing, just do it later if I engage pre-delay. But that's not the case with all the reverbs. And in some plugins, you even have a pre-delay for the early part and for the reverb part, which I also think it's good if you have both. And then many of reverbs anyway come in slowly. So then actually, if you really measure it, and you said your pre-delay 30 milliseconds, it's never ever 30 milliseconds. It's just something. And you have no control over it because it's anyway different in all the reverbs. So at the end, it just needs to give you a great dimension. And again, to me, it's like, do I want to have the reverb coupled to the instrument? And then I tend to have shorter or no pre-delays, because with today's reverb that are so accurate, you don't really need pre-delay if you don't want it. And then the source goes to the back. Or do I want to have it decoupled? I want to have here my vocal and really far, far, far away the reverb. And I don't want that my vocal goes away from the speaker. And then I try to make it as large as possible so that it still sounds good. So that would be my point with pre-delay. It's actually important to set it right, but I don't look into rhythmic things at this point, but maybe other engineers too.
Well, that's quite insightful. As a matter of fact, I've been thinking about it, and I believe at some point after 60 milliseconds, it just starts giving me the results you explain in your videos. I believe we have a little bit of time, not too much, and we have a few questions that the subscribers sent. They submitted, so you could answer and give your opinion on them. I believe we don't have enough time to do all of them, but I would like to just pick a few of them and
the most interesting one.
The most interesting ones, and announce the winners, because I'm giving away a few plugins with this interview, and nice. I believe they are going to do a few people happy.
Nice.
So I have here, let me see. Well, Edward Morales was asking about your approach to that, but I believe we covered that already with quite a lot of useful information. The monk Beats, he was asking if you have if you consider that hardware reverbs are still different from plugins, that you can get results faster, which he's got quite a few of them.
Yeah, I tend to think that they actually give me a more lush and a more rich sound and more deep sound stage for whatever reason. It's a little bit strange, actually, because I mean, reverb is now really something that in a plugin should sound as good. One theory that I have is that it has to do with jitter and with clocks. Because what I like most, if I have my 480 unit, and I basically use the analog inputs and the analog outputs on this, and most engineers agree, because if you go in digital and go out digital, it doesn't sound so interesting anymore. So meaning if you go in analog and go out analog, this thing can be clocked internally, and then it has its jitter, and probably the jitter is quite high. And maybe if you have the reverb and you have jitter, this makes the reverb more lush and more interesting. I mean, this could actually be, I discussed this with a lot of designers, and they agree that this could be an option. But then I also use my Lexicon 960, which I love. And this one, of course, I interface it digital because I bought that one with digital inputs. So there, this jitter thing would not work anymore, because if it's digital in, digital out, there is no jitter. And still, I absolutely love this 960 algorithm. Maybe it's really just the algorithm, because I was explained by a Lexicon engineer that the PCM algorithm is different, but the 960 had its own algorithm. So maybe I just like this. I do have Lexicon PCM reverbs in the box too. I also use them sometimes, but I like the 960 far more. And I have a Sony sampling reverb in the outboard. And usually, if I compare this one to the Altiverb sample, so of course it's difficult to compare because you have different samples, even if it's the same room, it was mic'd different. But usually the Sony, I could have easily 6 dB more reverb and it still sounds good. And with the Altiverb, I cannot go that high. And again, that could have many reasons. I don't know it really exactly. But now maybe to just turn around here a little bit, I think the reverb plugins that you have in the box really are great too. And you have so many of them, because hardware units, even as a sound engineer who can buy a lot of stuff, I'm not going to buy more hardware reverb. And I maybe have 6 or 7 and that's enough. But in the plugin, I mean, if a new reverb is coming out, like I use the Valhalla, I just get it in. I mean, it doesn't cost anything and you can use it for whatever. And also I bought this 480 simulation by, I think, Softtube is the name, or who does the 480, or Relab, I think it is. Relab 480. And I mean, it is not totally as good as the real 480, but I mean, actually, if you don't compare, it's also not really a problem. And if I mix film music nowadays, I very often use this plugin because I need 1 reverb per stem, and no problem at all to use it. Finally, you just use what you have and make it sound good. And those reverbs are really great that we have in the box. And if you need something different, you always can have another plugin. That's the good thing with the plugins.
So that lushness that you were talking about, is that why you add a little bit of saturation after the reverb and a little bit of compression?
Oh yeah, that's always a good thing. To me, this is like if you are in a real room. We said that we have walls in a real room. Now, if you have a drum or a vocal recording and you have room mics to capture the reflections of this wall, I mean, you could have small diaphragm precise microphones like DPA, which we maybe would use as room mics for an orchestra because we really want to have the accurate room. But however, if a drummer is playing loud and we don't want to have an accurate recording of that wall with the reflection. There we want to have some rock and roll. And I might take my U47 stand for a room mics. And this is what I like if we work with reverb on a dry recording. We just have the drum dry in an isolation booth. Let's give reverb, obviously, to basically simulate like it was in a bigger room. But now, why not give a little bit distortion to the reverb? And with that, we like simulate like if you would have recorded the wall with tube microphones. And of course, I don't set the distortion or saturation so high that you really can hear it, but just a little bit. And your reverb has a lot more punch. Then you can bring even down the reverb level and you still hear it. Because that's a secret, if you change the reverb a little bit with distortion, with maybe some micro pitch shifting, with maybe some mondo mode that is just shuffling a little bit from left to right, just do very little variation. Then
that's quite interesting.
Softer, a lot softer, you still hear it. And this is actually what plugins are.
That's right.
Than outboard, because with the plugin, very often the reverb is too similar to the dry source, and then it kind of melts in a very bad way. And the reverb would not really melt too much with the source. Like in a real good room, you also want to hear the orchestra, but then you hear the wall reflection. Of course, everything melts together somehow, but it should not melt together in a bad way. And that's why if you add some saturation, actually you have a little bit more difference in the reverb, and then you can note it more easy. And that's actually what you can learn if you listen to some great pop mixer like Michael Brauer. He's really good. You always hear the reverb on everything, but it's always nice. And
it's easy to locate the reverb in the mix because it's more controlled. It's not over the place jumping here and there. That's quite interesting.
The reverb design, yeah, that's important.
We have less than 10 minutes. So I just want to announce the winners of the contest, of the plugin contest. And let me see. Sunny Pro, second. He asked 3 questions, and I believe we covered all of his already. Yeah. Virus Indigo submitted 2, but Chris Corral submitted 5, and he said the winner. And let me see. I have to look it up, but there might be a third winner, which is Virus Indigo. But I'm not sure if it's got. In any case, I will get him some. And thank you very much for sending your questions and for welcoming Daniel to your lives. I believe he will appreciate it as well. And if you subscribe to his channel and follow him on social media, he's always posting great pictures and sharing of his work with great artists. And just support him and go and take a look at the Mixing Bible he just released, which is full of all of this, I'm sure. And as soon as I have a time, I will take a look as well myself.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was interesting. And if there are other questions, we still can make another video one day where we maybe just might go more into questions if there is anything left.
That's very kind. Absolutely. I will take it on your word.
And I hope you have all the questions, because I think now we talked more. And if you feel there are some questions that would be interesting, then we really could just make, I don't know, maybe a 20-minute video where we just meet again, and then we just go directly through the questions. Not that your guys think we didn't answer them.
Yeah, absolutely. You have them. There are very nice questions. And well, we only have 1 hour today, and we've made the best out of it. Thank you very much, Daniel.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.